She teleports into my room every night and leaves her scent behind. He sat at his workbench, tinkering with a small quantum device, his hands steady but his mind racing. Engineers like him were never satisfied with what existed, they always wanted more. Faster energy, smarter machines, safer colonies. Tonight, however, his work was about to be interrupted by something no human technology could explain. He noticed it first as a faint shimmer in the corner of his room. At first, he thought it was a reflection from the neon lights outside. But the shimmer moved, and it moved with purpose. Ethan froze. His instincts screamed that this was no ordinary light. The room was small, compact like all apartments on the colony, and yet the shimmer seemed to have its own space, hovering near his desk. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the shimmer solidified into a figure. A young woman stood there, looking around the room as if it were the most normal place in the universe. Ethan's mouth went dry. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, but when he looked again, she was still there. She had long, silver hair that shimmered faintly in the low light, and her eyes were wide, filled with curiosity. Before he could speak, she vanished. The room was empty again except for one strange thing, a scent. It was faint at first, like flowers after rain, yet it carried something more, something that made the hairs on Ethan's arms stand up. He leaned back, trying to understand what had just happened. The smell lingered, subtle but unmistakable. Ethan shook his head. "Okay, think," he whispered to himself. Engineers were trained to solve impossible problems, and this was impossible. He checked the room thoroughly. No doors had opened. No windows had been tampered with. No drones, no holograms, nothing, yet he had seen her. And he had smelled her. He tried to rationalize it. Maybe a hallucination, stress, sleep deprivation. His hand hovered over the quantum device he had been building. The device itself was designed to test microportals in controlled conditions. He had always joked that one day it might open a doorway to something or someone. Maybe the joke had come true. But deep down, Ethan knew this was real. Humans had survived and thrived for centuries by noticing anomalies, by questioning the strange, by pushing beyond fear. That human curiosity now drove him to act. He spent the rest of the night setting up cameras and sensors around the room, making sure to cover every angle. Motion sensors, heat detectors, quantum field detectors. He turned the apartment into a small lab, hoping to catch the next appearance. And he waited. The night was long. The colony outside was alive with distant lights and mechanical hums, but inside, Ethan's apartment remained silent. Hours passed. Just as he was about to fall asleep, exhausted, the shimmer returned. It started at the same spot near the corner of his desk. Ethan held his breath. Slowly, carefully, the figure appeared again. This time he was ready. The cameras clicked, sensors beeped softly, and the small quantum detectors began recording unusual energy fluctuations. She looked around the room just as she had before. This time she noticed the devices. She paused, her eyes locking onto Ethan. He tried to speak, but no words came out. She tilted her head slightly, curious but calm. Then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she vanished again, leaving behind the faint scent. Ethan ran to check the recordings. Every sensor had picked up anomalies, readings no human device could fully explain. She was not a projection, not a drone, not a hallucination. She was something else. Something from somewhere else. He sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. Humans were explorers by nature, and he felt that spark now, thrill, fear, and wonder all at once. For the first time, he realized the universe might be bigger than he had ever imagined, and that humans, with their curiosity and determination, were capable of understanding it. The next morning, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Her eyes, the shimmer, the scent, it was all real. But what was she? A traveler, a visitor, a being from another dimension? Ethan didn't know, but he intended to find out. Over the next few days, Ethan studied the patterns of her appearances. She came at night, always around the same hour. She seemed drawn to the corner near his desk, as if the quantum anomaly he had accidentally created in his experiments was a beacon for her. Every night he prepared in the same way, sensors, detectors, cameras, but he also tried something new. He left small notes, hoping she could understand. The first night he left a note, he simply wrote, "Hello, I don't know who you are. Please be careful." He placed it where she usually appeared, then waited. When she came, she paused and looked at the note. Her expression changed slightly, like she recognized something familiar. She didn't touch the note, but she lingered longer than before, leaving her scent stronger this time. Ethan felt a thrill of success. Communication, no matter how small, was possible. Days turned into a week. Ethan learned more about her patterns. She didn't speak, didn't touch anything, but her presence left subtle marks. The scent was consistent, almost like a signature. He even noticed tiny disturbances in the air, small ripples that suggested she was moving through something he couldn't see. Humans had always survived and thrived by decoding the unknown, by pushing boundaries, by refusing to give up when the impossible appeared. Ethan felt that human spirit strongly. Every night, he learned more, experimented more, and grew more determined to understand her. Then came the night that changed everything. Ethan decided to leave a small holographic message. Using his devices, he projected a simple image of a hand reaching out along with the words, "Are you lost? Can I help?" When she appeared, she saw it. For the first time, she responded, not in words, not in voice, but in gesture. She mimicked reaching out to the hologram, then stepped back, her expression both sad and curious. Ethan realized she might be trapped somehow, caught between her world and his. For hours, he observed her. He noticed patterns in the way she moved, the way she paused, the way she seemed drawn to certain areas. Every detail was important. Every observation might help him find a way to stabilize whatever was pulling her here. By the end of the night, Ethan was exhausted, but he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Humans had survived countless impossible situations, not because they were the strongest, but because they were clever, adaptable, and persistent. And that same spirit now fueled him to help this mysterious visitor. The smell lingered long after she vanished. It was a reminder that the universe was bigger, stranger, and more beautiful than he had ever imagined. And that humans, with their endless curiosity and courage, could face it head-on. Ethan knew one thing for certain: tomorrow night he would be ready. He would be ready to see her again, ready to understand, ready to reach across the impossible and maybe, just maybe, make contact with something extraordinary. Humans were explorers. Humans were problem solvers. Humans were survivors. And tonight, Ethan felt that truth more than ever. Outside, the city of the colony continued its steady hum. But inside, in a small, quiet apartment, a young engineer was ready to face the impossible, one night at a time. The days that followed the first encounter were filled with restless anticipation for Ethan. Every day he checked his devices, adjusted his sensors, and replayed the recordings of her appearances. He analyzed every detail: the shimmer of her form, the way her hair caught the light, the faint ripples in the air when she appeared. Everything suggested she was real, but not of this world. Ethan's life had become a delicate balance between his regular engineering work and the mysterious visitor who appeared every night. During the day, he tried to act normal, but in the back of his mind, he was already preparing for the next night. The quantum device he had been tinkering with now had a new purpose: understanding the anomaly she traveled through. He noticed something unusual after a few nights of careful observation. The shimmer, the way she materialized, wasn't random. It appeared only in certain areas of his room, and the time of her arrival was almost always precise, around 2:17 a.m., his local colony time. The pattern suggested intelligence. She wasn't simply lost, she seemed drawn to something specific in the environment. Ethan's mind raced. If I can figure out the pattern, maybe I can communicate more effectively, he thought. Humans had always solved problems by observing patterns. From the earliest explorers who mapped the stars to scientists who unlocked the secrets of energy and matter, humans never stopped searching for understanding. And now Ethan felt that same determination driving him forward. He decided to adjust his setup. He created a small grid of motion sensors, light sensors, and quantum field detectors around the room. Each sensor was connected to a central console that could record the exact moment she appeared. This way, Ethan could track her movements with precision. He even installed a small temperature gauge to measure the air around her, hoping it might reveal something about how she arrived. That night, he waited with his heart pounding. The city outside was quieter than usual, and even the hum of the colony seemed to fade as he focused entirely on his room. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the shimmer appeared again. She looked the same as before, silver hair catching the faint light, eyes wide with curiosity. But this time, Ethan noticed something new. As she materialized, tiny ripples spread outward from her feet, faint disturbances in the air. His sensors recorded energy spikes, but nothing that could be explained by current technology. She moved carefully around the room, her gaze fixed on the quantum device. Ethan held his breath. He didn't want to startle her. Slowly, he activated a small holographic note he had prepared. "I want to help. Are you trapped?" She paused. Her eyes widened slightly, and she stepped closer to the hologram. Then, in a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture, she raised her hand and pointed to a corner of the room. Ethan followed her gaze. It was near the quantum anomaly his device had been generating. The realization hit him immediately. She was not appearing randomly. She was drawn to the anomaly as if it were a bridge between her world and his. The scent she left behind grew stronger that night. Ethan noticed it was not just a smell, it had a chemical signature. Using a small, portable analyzer, he took a sample. The readings were unlike anything he had seen. Complex organic compounds combined in ways that suggested her presence might affect the air itself. His curiosity surged. Humans were naturally explorers and problem solvers. If anyone could understand this, it would be him. Over the next few nights, Ethan began experimenting carefully. He placed small objects near the quantum anomaly, notes, lights, even a tiny mechanical bird he had built as a toy. Each time she appeared, she interacted with them in subtle ways. Sometimes she paused longer near a note, sometimes she looked at the bird and tilted her head as if curious. Every gesture was a clue. Every clue was a step toward understanding. Then one night, Ethan noticed a startling pattern. The disturbances in the air, the way the energy shifted, the faint shimmer of her form, all of it was rhythmic, almost like a pulse, and the pulse corresponded to her scent. The stronger the pulse, the more intense the floral-like scent became. She wasn't just appearing, she was leaving messages through subtle signals humans were just beginning to detect. Excited, Ethan began decoding the pulse. He measured the fluctuations in the quantum field and the timing of her movements. Slowly, he began to map out a series of patterns. Each night, she seemed to follow these invisible markers, like a traveler guided by a hidden path. Humans had always thrived by noticing patterns, by turning chaos into order, and Ethan's instincts were guiding him toward a breakthrough. His breakthrough came unexpectedly. One night, he left a new type of hologram, a simple spiral symbol accompanied by a tiny light pattern. When she appeared, she stopped at the symbol and repeated a similar gesture with her hand, almost like tracing the spiral in the air. Ethan's heart raced. This was the first clear attempt at communication. She could see and respond to human-made signals. He realized something else, even more profound. She didn't appear out of curiosity alone. She seemed to be searching for help, for stability, perhaps for a way back. Humans had always been problem solvers, and the instinct to help those in need was at the heart of humanity. Ethan knew he had to act. During the day, he worked tirelessly to improve his devices. He built a small stabilizer for the quantum anomaly using materials he scavenged from old experiments. Every adjustment was precise, every calculation mattered. He ran simulations, testing the ways the anomaly could be stabilized, so that she could appear safely without causing unpredictable disturbances in the room. Humans had survived because of ingenuity, adaptability, and perseverance, and Ethan relied on every ounce of those traits. The nights became longer and more intense. Sometimes she appeared and stayed for only a few seconds. Other times, she lingered, her gestures more deliberate. Ethan began leaving small patterns of light and holograms to test her reactions. Each time she responded, slowly forming a rudimentary understanding between them. It was communication without words, but it was real. One night, as Ethan watched her, he noticed her hesitation near a new object he had placed, a small prism reflecting light across the room. She reached toward it, then recoiled slightly, almost fearful. Ethan realized that she was not just a visitor. She was cautious, aware, and perhaps even vulnerable. Humans had always faced the unknown with both curiosity and care, and now he understood that he needed both qualities to help her. Ethan decided to try something bold. Using his holographic system, he projected a simple question in light patterns. "Can you control your arrival?" She appeared as usual, paused at the hologram, and then made a gesture Ethan could barely interpret. She moved her hands in circular motions, then pointed toward the quantum anomaly. It was subtle, but Ethan understood the meaning. She could not control it fully. The anomaly was pulling her, guiding her, and sometimes bringing her into his world unexpectedly. A wave of realization hit him. She was trapped in a situation humans had rarely faced, a being caught between dimensions, unable to fully return home. And yet humans had always faced impossible odds. They had explored space, survived natural disasters, built civilizations against all odds. Ethan knew that if anyone could find a solution, it would be him. The scent that lingered after her departures became a kind of map. Ethan collected samples each night, analyzing their chemical structure. Over time, he began to see changes, subtle differences in intensity, slight variations in composition. He theorized that the scent was more than a fragrance, it was part of her presence, a signal or a clue about her condition. Humans had always used indirect evidence to solve mysteries, and this was no different. By the end of the second week, Ethan had a plan. He would attempt to stabilize the anomaly, create a controlled environment for her appearances, and test whether she could respond to more direct communication. The thought excited him and terrified him at the same time. Humans thrived on challenge, on pushing boundaries, and now he faced one unlike any before. That night he prepared meticulously. Sensors were everywhere, lights were adjusted, holographic patterns projected, and the stabilizer connected to the quantum device. He waited, his pulse quickening as the clock ticked closer to 2:17 a.m. The shimmer appeared, more vivid than ever. She looked at the new setup with curiosity. Her eyes widened slightly as she recognized the familiar pattern of his preparations. She approached cautiously, drawn to the holographic spiral and the stabilizer. Ethan held his breath. Every reading on his devices fluctuated wildly, but he remained focused. This was human ingenuity in action, observation, experimentation, and courage in the face of the unknown. She paused near the spiral, then extended her hand toward the stabilizer. A faint ripple of energy spread across the room. Ethan noticed that her scent intensified and the readings on his devices spiked. It was as if she was responding directly to the environment he had created. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, she traced the spiral in the air with her fingers, mimicking the holographic projection. Ethan understood the meaning instantly. She was learning to interact, learning to communicate, and perhaps even understanding that he was trying to help her. When she vanished that night, the scent lingered longer than ever, filling the room with a strange, comforting aroma. Ethan smiled. Humans had always faced the impossible with intelligence and determination, and tonight he had proven that same spirit could bridge the gap between worlds. Tomorrow, he thought, he would take the next step. There was still much to learn, many questions to answer, but for the first time he felt hope. Humans had survived countless challenges because they never gave up, never stopped exploring, and never stopped trying to understand. And now that same spirit was guiding him to help a mysterious visitor who had no home but his room. Ethan knew that this was just the beginning. The nights ahead would be filled with discoveries, challenges, and perhaps even danger. But he was ready. Humans thrived on the unknown, on puzzles, on challenges that tested their mind, their courage, and their heart. And Ethan, like every human before him, was ready to face it. The nights had grown long, but Ethan felt more alive than ever. The mysterious visitor, the woman who teleported into his room, had become more than a puzzle. She was now a challenge that called on every ounce of his intelligence, patience, and ingenuity. Every night he learned something new, about her, about the anomaly, and about the incredible possibilities the universe held. He had spent countless hours studying the patterns of her appearances. She arrived almost exactly at 2:17 a.m., and each time, her gestures and reactions seemed to follow subtle rules. The quantum anomaly in the corner of his room was the key. Every fluctuation in its energy coincided with her arrival. She was drawn to it like a moth to a flame, unable to resist its pull, yet also unable to control where or when it brought her. Ethan had prepared the room again, as meticulously as ever. Holographic patterns glimmered softly in the low light, and small sensors monitored every subtle disturbance. He had even added a new element, a delicate grid of lights on the floor, forming simple shapes that could guide her movements. The goal was to establish a form of communication, a way to understand her and help her stabilize her presence. When the shimmer appeared, she looked different. Not in form, her silver hair and luminous eyes were the same, but in demeanor. She seemed more hesitant, more cautious, as if she were aware that Ethan had been observing her for days. She moved slowly, her steps light, almost floating above the floor. Her eyes lingered on the holographic patterns, and for the first time she seemed to recognize their meaning. Ethan held his breath. Communication had always been the most human of skills. It was how humans survived, shared knowledge, and solved problems together. Now he was extending that skill across a barrier he barely understood. He projected the simplest message he could think of, a glowing line connecting one light to another, forming a path across the floor. At the same time, he displayed the word safe in soft, pulsing light. She paused at the edge of the pattern, then traced the line with her finger, as if acknowledging it. She hesitated, then slowly followed the path. Ethan could see the subtle changes in her posture, relief, curiosity, and an unmistakable desire to communicate. Her gestures were delicate, almost like a language he had never learned, but instinctively he understood them. She pointed toward the anomaly, then made a circular motion with her hands. The meaning was clear. She was drawn to the anomaly, but she could not control it fully. It was pulling her unpredictably, and the path he had created helped her move safely while she was here. Ethan's heart pounded with excitement. Humans had always relied on observation, experimentation, and ingenuity to solve problems. And now he was witnessing the same principles in action with someone, or something, completely unlike himself. The thrill of discovery, combined with the responsibility of helping her, made every second tense and exhilarating. Night after night, he refined their communication. He introduced new holographic symbols, lights, and even soft sound patterns to see if she could respond. And she did. She began repeating certain gestures in response, almost like mimicking his signals. Each night, their interaction grew more complex, more meaningful. Ethan began to notice subtle changes in the scent she left behind. It fluctuated with her movements and seemed to intensify when she approached specific parts of the room. It was as if the scent carried information, a message encoded in chemical signals. He collected samples carefully, analyzing them with his equipment. Humans had always decoded patterns in nature, from the flight of birds to the growth of plants, and Ethan applied that same logic to the signals she left behind. One night, he tried something bold. He projected a small, glowing sphere in the center of the room, surrounded by concentric rings of light. The sphere pulsed gently, and the rings expanded and contracted rhythmically. He had no idea if she would understand, but he hoped it would serve as a visual cue for her to interact. When she appeared, she paused at the edge of the pattern. Her eyes widened slightly, and she reached toward the sphere. The air seemed to ripple as her hand approached it. Then slowly, deliberately, she traced the rings in a circular motion, mirroring the pulses of light. Ethan gasped. This was no longer random gestures. She was responding to a structured pattern, a language he was beginning to create. He realized something profound in that moment. Humans had survived and thrived because they could adapt to the unknown, understand patterns, and communicate across barriers. Tonight, he was witnessing that principle in action, bridging not only space but perhaps time, dimension, or reality itself. Ethan decided to take the next step. He projected a series of simple symbols, each representing a question. Are you safe? Can you control your arrival? Do you need help? The woman paused at each symbol, tracing it in the air, then pointing toward the anomaly. Her gestures were careful, deliberate, and consistent. Ethan understood. She needed help, and she was aware that he could provide it. Excitement and urgency filled Ethan. Humans had always risen to challenges, often when the odds seemed impossible. Now, he faced one of the most extraordinary challenges he had ever encountered. The anomaly had to be stabilized, and she needed to be able to remain safely in his world for a time, long enough to communicate and perhaps find a way back. He worked tirelessly, running simulations and adjusting his devices. The stabilizer he had built earlier was connected to the quantum anomaly, fine-tuned to respond to fluctuations in the energy field. Every night, he tested it carefully, observing how she responded. She seemed more confident with each appearance, exploring the room and interacting with his holograms more deliberately. One night, the breakthrough came. Ethan had adjusted the stabilizer to create a controlled field around the anomaly. When she appeared, she moved directly into the field without hesitation. The air rippled, but she remained steady, her form clear and luminous. She looked at Ethan, and for the first time there was something unmistakable in her eyes: trust. Ethan's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and relief. Humans had always survived by combining courage, intelligence, and compassion. By taking calculated risks, learning from failures, and never giving up, they achieved the impossible. Tonight, he realized that those same qualities had bridged the gap between him and a being from another reality. They spent hours interacting that night. Ethan projected symbols and paths, and she responded with gestures and movements. He noticed subtle patterns in the ripples of energy she produced, in the way her scent fluctuated, in the gentle shifts in the air around her. Every detail was meaningful. Humans had always been observers of the world, able to find information where none seemed apparent. Ethan was applying that same instinct to a being he could barely comprehend. At one point, she paused at the center of the room, near the stabilizer. Ethan noticed her eyes flick toward him, and he instinctively reached out with a holographic projection of a hand. She mirrored the motion, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time, Ethan felt a connection that went beyond observation or communication. It was understanding. He realized that humans had always sought connection, even in the most dangerous or unknown circumstances. They built relationships, shared knowledge, and protected one another. Tonight, he and this visitor were doing the same, across boundaries that no human had ever crossed before. The night wore on, and finally she vanished. But the scent remained, stronger than ever, almost as if she were leaving a message behind. Ethan carefully collected a sample, analyzing its composition. It was intricate, almost musical in its complexity. He smiled. Humans had always communicated in many ways: words, symbols, gestures, art, music. Perhaps she had her own language, encoded in the simplest and most natural form available: her presence. Ethan sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. He had learned so much in a few nights. She was intelligent, cautious, aware, and capable of responding to patterns. She was trapped by the anomaly, drawn to it uncontrollably, yet willing to engage and trust him. Humans had always faced the unknown with courage and curiosity, and he felt that same spirit now guiding him forward. Tomorrow, he would refine their system of communication even further. He would attempt to ask more complex questions, to understand not only her presence but her world. Humans had always solved problems by pushing boundaries, thinking creatively, and persevering in the face of uncertainty. Ethan was doing the same. As dawn approached, the city outside the apartment hummed quietly, oblivious to the extraordinary events occurring within a single room. Ethan leaned back, eyes closed, letting the lessons of the night sink in. Humans had always thrived because they did not surrender to fear. They observed, they experimented, they learned, and above all, they acted with hope and determination. And tonight, he had acted. He knew the coming nights would be even more challenging. The anomaly was unpredictable, the visitor's condition fragile, and the risks real. But humans had survived far greater dangers. They had crossed oceans, mapped continents, explored the stars, and survived countless unknown threats. Ethan was confident that with careful observation, intelligent experimentation, and patient communication, he could help her, and perhaps uncover the greatest discovery of his life. The smell lingered, a reminder that the universe was far larger, stranger, and more beautiful than he had ever imagined. And it was human curiosity, courage, and ingenuity that would guide him forward, night after night, as he bridged the impossible gap between worlds. Ethan's apartment had transformed into a laboratory unlike any other. Wires snaked across the floor, small lights blinked softly on sensors, and his quantum stabilizer hummed quietly on the desk. The nights of observation and careful experimentation had taught him much. He understood the patterns of her arrival, the subtle pulses of the quantum anomaly, and the mysterious signals hidden in her scent and movements. But observation alone would no longer be enough. It was time for action. He leaned over his console, reviewing the data from the past week. Every night, she appeared for only a short time, hesitant, uncertain. The quantum anomaly drew her unpredictably, and while she had begun to interact with the holographic signals, there was no guarantee she could stay safely if the anomaly fluctuated. Humans had always survived because they didn't wait for circumstances to be perfect. They acted. They experimented, improvised, and adapted. Ethan knew he had to do the same. He began planning a new system. It would combine the stabilizer with a network of light grids and holographic cues, creating a controlled space where she could appear without risk of harm. He tested simulations on his devices, calculating energy flows, quantum fluctuations, and the safest possible configurations. Each adjustment was precise. Any mistake could have consequences for both her and the surrounding environment. As he worked, Ethan thought about the nature of the woman herself. She was cautious, intelligent, and perceptive. Her gestures and responses were becoming more complex each night, indicating a level of understanding far beyond simple instinct. Humans had always excelled because of empathy and intelligence, and Ethan realized that his careful observation and patience were essential to building trust. The connection they were forming, though silent and subtle, was profound. That night, he arranged the room meticulously. Sensors were placed in a grid around the quantum anomaly, holographic symbols marked safe pathways, and soft lights created a gentle pattern to guide her movements. The stabilizer was powered up, calibrated to the precise energy levels required to maintain a stable field. He had also created a system of signals, pulses of light, vibrations, and holographic symbols that would allow him to communicate in real time with her gestures. As midnight approached, Ethan prepared himself. He knew that what he was attempting was risky. The anomaly was unpredictable, and the woman's form was tied to its fluctuations. If he miscalculated, she could be drawn violently or even vanish entirely. But humans had always thrived by taking calculated risks, and Ethan trusted his observations and designs. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the shimmer appeared. She looked around, cautious but familiar. Ethan activated the stabilizer and the air around her rippled gently, but she remained solid. Relief flooded him. It worked. He had created a safe space, however temporary, for her to appear and interact. She moved toward the holographic symbols, tracing them in the air with graceful gestures. Ethan responded by activating a sequence of lights, guiding her toward the center of the stabilizer's field. Her eyes followed the pattern, and slowly she stepped forward. Each movement was deliberate, careful, but there was a growing sense of trust in her posture. Ethan projected a simple question in the form of a glowing symbol. "Can you stay here safely?" She paused, then traced the symbol with her hand. Her gesture was slow, deliberate, and clear. She could stay, but only as long as the stabilizer maintained the field. Ethan nodded, mentally noting the adjustments needed to prolong the effect. Humans had always solved problems step by step, using observation, adaptation, and intelligence. Tonight was no different. Hours passed as they experimented within the controlled field. Ethan tested various patterns, light sequences, and holographic cues to see how she would respond. She mirrored his gestures, followed paths he created, and even seemed to anticipate some of the sequences. It was as if she were learning a language built from their shared understanding. Humans had always relied on communication to solve challenges, and now, across impossible boundaries, they were establishing their own method. As the night wore on, Ethan began to notice changes in her energy. The pulsing of the quantum field around her fluctuated less, and the ripples in the air became smoother. She seemed more stable, more comfortable. Humans had always thrived by creating order from chaos, by finding patterns and building solutions that others could not. Ethan's careful planning, observation, and ingenuity were paying off. Then came a subtle moment of connection. Ethan projected a series of small, glowing spheres in a spiral pattern, representing a question. "Do you need help returning?" She paused, her luminous eyes fixed on the display. Slowly, she traced the spiral in the air, then pointed again toward the anomaly. Ethan realized she could not fully control her arrivals. The anomaly was still unpredictable, and while she could remain safely in his room for short periods, she was ultimately at its mercy. Humans had always faced challenges that were bigger than themselves, situations where cleverness and courage mattered more than strength alone. Ethan felt that same spirit now, guiding him to find a solution. He decided to try a bold step. Using his stabilizer, he created a temporary extension of the field, a sort of safe zone around the anomaly itself. It was experimental. He had no guarantee it would hold, but he hoped it would allow her to interact more freely without risk of being pulled violently by the quantum fluctuations. When she appeared that night, she moved directly into the extended field. Ethan watched her carefully, adjusting energy flows and holographic patterns in real time. The air rippled around her, but she remained steady, her gestures becoming more confident. It was as if she could sense the boundaries of the safe zone and trust in their stability. Humans had always thrived on the ability to observe, adapt, and solve problems in real time, and Ethan embodied that principle fully. Over the next few nights, he refined the setup. He introduced new holographic cues, subtle vibrations in the floor to indicate safe paths, and even a system of lights that pulsed in response to her movements. She responded beautifully, moving with increasing confidence and precision. Her gestures were no longer hesitant. They were deliberate, almost as if she were learning a form of structured communication. Ethan took careful notes, recording every gesture, every ripple, every fluctuation in the field. Humans had always excelled at recording observations and using them to improve outcomes. Each night, he analyzed the data, adjusted the stabilizer, and refined the communication system. The process was slow, methodical, but effective. One night, he projected a more complex pattern, a sequence of interconnected circles representing a question. "Can you describe your world?" She paused longer than usual, tracing the circles carefully. Then, to his amazement, she created a series of gestures he had never seen before, patterns of hands and movements that seemed deliberate, meaningful, almost like a language. Ethan realized that she was attempting to convey information, to share knowledge about her existence. Humans had always used creativity, intelligence, and observation to decode the unknown, and tonight he was doing exactly that. The connection between them deepened. Ethan felt a sense of purpose unlike any he had known. Humans had survived countless challenges by combining intelligence, compassion, and perseverance. He now understood that the same qualities could bridge worlds, connect beings, and solve problems that seemed impossible. Hours passed, and finally, the night came to an end. She stepped back, her gestures slowing, and the field around her gently dissolved. The scent lingered, stronger than ever, carrying a sense of presence and trust. Ethan carefully collected a sample, analyzing its composition and noting subtle changes. Each night, the scent became a form of communication, a message encoded in chemistry, energy, and presence. Ethan leaned back, exhausted but exhilarated. Humans had always faced the unknown with curiosity, courage, and determination. They had built civilizations, explored the stars, and solved problems that seemed impossible. Tonight, he had proven that same spirit could work across dimensions, across realities, and with beings who were not of his world. Tomorrow, he would refine the system further, expanding the safe zone and testing new forms of communication. The challenge was immense, but humans thrived on challenges. They adapted, learned, and persevered. And Ethan, guided by observation, intelligence, and empathy, was confident that he could help her more than ever before. As dawn approached, he looked around the apartment, his transformed laboratory, and smiled. The room was no longer just a living space. It was a bridge between worlds, a place where human ingenuity, courage, and compassion could make the impossible possible. And somewhere beyond the veil of the quantum anomaly, she waited, ready to trust him again, ready to explore the possibilities he had created. Humans had always faced uncertainty with hope and determination. Ethan felt that same hope burning inside him, guiding him forward night after night, as he prepared for the challenges yet to come. The night was still. Outside, the colony's lights glimmered softly, but inside Ethan's apartment, a tension unlike any before filled the air. He had spent weeks preparing, observing, and experimenting. Every calculation, every adjustment, every small holographic pattern had led to this moment. Tonight, he would attempt something that was as daring as it was dangerous. To stabilize the quantum anomaly long enough for the visitor, the woman who had been appearing in his room, to communicate fully and perhaps find a way back to her world. Ethan double-checked his setup. The stabilizer hummed steadily, casting a faint blue glow over the room. Holographic patterns marked safe pathways, grids of light pulsed softly to guide her movements, and sensors monitored every fluctuation in the anomaly. His heart raced, but he focused, knowing that humans had always succeeded in the face of danger through preparation, ingenuity, and courage. As the clock ticked toward 2:17 a.m., Ethan held his breath. The shimmer appeared, as it always did, but this time it was different. She seemed hesitant, her luminous eyes scanning the room, as if sensing the importance of the moment. The air rippled gently around her as she materialized, but the stabilizer maintained a steady field, keeping her form solid and clear. Ethan projected a series of glowing circles in a spiral, representing the question he wanted to ask most. "Do you want to return home?" She paused, tracing the circles carefully, then looked toward the anomaly. Her gestures were precise, almost urgent. Ethan understood immediately. She did want to go back. She had been trapped in the anomaly for longer than he could imagine, drawn unpredictably, unable to control her appearances. Humans had always thrived on empathy, courage, and problem-solving. It was now his turn to act, to help her find a way back. The hours that followed were intense. Ethan adjusted the stabilizer continuously, keeping the anomaly within precise limits. He projected new holographic cues, testing her responses, while she moved through the patterns with growing confidence. Humans had always learned by observation, trial, and error, and Ethan's perseverance was paying off. He noticed subtle changes in her energy. The ripples of the anomaly became smoother as she interacted more deliberately with the holographic patterns. The scent she left behind, once chaotic and fluctuating, now carried a steady, almost musical rhythm. It was a signal, a form of communication Ethan was finally beginning to understand. He decided to try a bold step. Using the stabilizer, he created an extended field around the anomaly itself, a safe zone that would allow her to remain longer and move freely. The risk was high. The anomaly could destabilize at any moment. But humans had always thrived on calculated risks, relying on intelligence, courage, and determination to overcome challenges. She stepped into the extended field carefully. Ethan watched every movement, adjusting energy flows and holographic cues in real time. The air rippled, but she remained steady. Her gestures became more deliberate, forming sequences that seemed almost like a language. Ethan realized that she was trying to tell him something important about her world. Humans had always decoded patterns and signals to solve mysteries, and now he applied that skill to a being beyond his reality. Hours passed as they interacted. Ethan projected symbols representing questions about her home, her world, and the anomaly. She responded with gestures, tracing shapes and patterns in the air. Slowly, he began to understand the nature of the anomaly. It was a bridge between dimensions, unstable and unpredictable, but navigable with the right energy and careful observation. The breakthrough came suddenly. Ethan noticed that the ripples of energy she created could synchronize with his stabilizer. By projecting subtle pulsing lights and adjusting energy flows, he could amplify the stability of the field. It was delicate, precise work, but the principle was clear. Humans had always succeeded by adapting to the unknown, by observing carefully, experimenting intelligently, and acting decisively. He projected the simplest and most crucial message: follow the path. I will keep you safe. She paused, looked at him, and then traced a path along the holographic lights he had arranged. The field pulsed gently around her as she moved, and Ethan adjusted the stabilizer continuously to maintain the safest possible conditions. The connection between them had become something extraordinary, not just observation or communication, but mutual trust. Humans had always survived and thrived because they could trust, collaborate, and act with empathy, and now, across dimensions, that principle was guiding them both. Suddenly, the anomaly pulsed violently, a wave of energy that could have torn through the apartment. Ethan's hands flew over the controls, adjusting every parameter, recalibrating the stabilizer in real time. His heart pounded, but he stayed calm. Humans had always faced danger and uncertainty with focused minds and steady hands. He had prepared for this. He would not fail. The pulse subsided, leaving the woman unharmed. She looked at him, her eyes wide with relief and something almost like gratitude. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. Humans had always acted with courage in the face of the unknown, and tonight that courage had bridged worlds. He guided her through a final sequence of holographic paths. Each step was precise, calculated, and carefully monitored. The scent she left behind pulsed rhythmically, almost as if she were sending a message of her own. Ethan interpreted it as a signal. She was ready, and the time to return was near. Almost there, he whispered, projecting the phrase in light. Humans had always persevered by breaking complex tasks into steps, and this was the final step. The stabilizer hummed steadily, the anomaly rippled gently, and the woman moved forward, tracing the final pattern he had prepared. Then it happened. The anomaly expanded slightly, forming a faint doorway of shimmering light. She paused at the threshold, looking back at Ethan. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Humans had always faced choices that required courage, trust, and action. Ethan had acted, and now she was choosing. She raised her hand, almost imperceptibly, and Ethan mirrored the gesture with a holographic projection. It was a farewell, a silent acknowledgement of the connection they had forged. Then, with a gentle ripple, she stepped through the doorway. The anomaly pulsed one final time, and she was gone. The apartment was empty again. The stabilizer powered down slowly, the holographic patterns dissolved, and the faint scent lingered in the air. Ethan exhaled, a mixture of relief, triumph, and awe filling him. Humans had always survived and thrived because they could act decisively, adapt to challenges, and persevere even when the odds seemed impossible. Tonight, that same spirit had guided him to bridge worlds, communicate with the unknown, and help someone in need. He collected a final sample of the scent, analyzing its composition. It was intricate, delicate, and utterly unique. Humans had always been observers and learners, and now he had recorded traces of something extraordinary, evidence of a being from beyond his world. Ethan sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. The nights of observation, experimentation, and careful planning had led to this moment. He had acted with intelligence, courage, and empathy, qualities that had allowed humans to survive, explore, and thrive across centuries. Now they had bridged a gap between realities. As dawn approached, the city outside the apartment glimmered in the early light. The anomaly had disappeared, leaving only the faint hum of the stabilizer and the lingering scent. Ethan felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Humans had always faced challenges that seemed impossible, but they had survived and succeeded through ingenuity, determination, and heart. Tonight, he had lived that truth fully. For days afterward, Ethan reflected on the experience. He had glimpsed a world beyond his own, interacted with a being from another dimension, and applied the qualities that defined humanity: curiosity, courage, empathy, and intelligence, to solve a problem that no one else could. Humans had always achieved the extraordinary by refusing to surrender to fear, by observing the unknown, and by acting with patience and creativity. The scent lingered subtly, a reminder that the universe was vast, mysterious, and full of wonders. Humans had always faced the unknown with hope and determination, and Ethan knew that spirit would continue to guide him. Somewhere across the anomaly, the woman was safe, returning to her world with the knowledge that another human had helped her, understood her, and acted with courage and care. Ethan returned to his workbench, already thinking of new experiments, new challenges, new mysteries to explore. Humans had always sought knowledge, explored the stars, and faced the impossible. He felt the same drive, the same determination, and the same hope. The nights ahead would hold new challenges, but he was ready. Humans thrived on curiosity, resilience, and the desire to understand and improve the world. And tonight, he had proven that those qualities could bridge worlds. The universe was vast and full of unknowns, but humans had always faced the impossible, and they always would. Ethan smiled, inhaling the faint scent that remained. It was a reminder of what had been achieved and of the incredible potential of humanity. Humans had survived, explored, and discovered not just by strength, but by heart, intelligence, and perseverance. Tonight had been a testament to that truth. And as the sun rose over the colony, Ethan felt a quiet certainty. The universe was full of mysteries, but humans, with their endless curiosity, courage, and ingenuity, would continue to explore, understand, and thrive. One night, one challenge, and one incredible discovery at a time.